Authorities in Mount Washington are investigating a tragic triple homicide that has left the community in shock. Police say 3 victims were found dead inside a home late Tuesday night. Their identities have not yet been released publicly, but neighbors and loved ones are already gathering to grieve. Family members describe the victims as kind and hardworking individuals whose lives were cut short far too soon. Friends lit candles and placed flowers outside the residence, creating a growing memorial as emotions ran high.
First time I've seen crime on our neighborhood, on our block.
Others in attendance demanded justice and answers as police continue to search for whoever is responsible.
Some booms, which I thought was, people practicing for tonight for the holiday.
Meanwhile, the Mount Washington community remains united in mourning, supporting one another as they process the devastating loss. The evening air in Mount Washington was unusually still when the first flashing blue and red lights
shot himself in an attempt to take his own life.
Night. The kind of night when most families were winding down, televisions glowing behind curtained windows, porch lights flickering off one by one. But for one home on a modest tree-lined street, the night would never fade into the ordinary. Inside that home, 3 lives had been brutally cut short. Neighbors first noticed something was wrong when the sounds of raised voices and a sudden thud carried into the street. At first, it was dismissed as a late-night argument or maybe even a TV turned too loud. But then came silence, a silence so deep it seemed to swallow the block. Moments later, someone noticed that the front door of the house had been left ajar. Concerned, a resident made the call to 911. When officers arrived, their flashlights cut through the stillness, beams sweeping across the front lawn, over the cracked walkway and into the open doorway. The first officer to step inside would later describe the scene as one that will never leave his memory. 3 victims, 3 lives extinguished in what investigators would immediately classify as a homicide. Word travels fast in small communities, and Mount Washington is no exception. Within the hour, the street was lined with yellow police tape, patrol cars, and a handful of stunned neighbors standing in disbelief. Some wrapped blankets around their shoulders, others whispered frantically into cell phones, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "I've lived here 20 years, said one neighbor, her voice trembling as she clutched her husband's arm. "Nothing like this has ever happened here. Not here. This isn't the kind of place you expect to see this." Police officers moved swiftly, cordoning off the area and ushering onlookers away. The glow of floodlights illuminated the house, throwing sharp shadows against its siding. Every flicker of movement inside the crime scene seemed amplified under the glare. Forensic teams stepped carefully, their gloves snapping into place as cameras clicked and evidence markers dotted the floors. By midnight, the neighborhood was a tableau of grief and confusion. Some residents cried openly, their tears reflecting the harsh lights. Others stood frozen, unable to process the sudden violence that had shattered the calm of their community. It wasn't long before word reached the families of the victims. Cars arrived in hurried succession, headlights slicing through the night, braking hard at the police barricade. Mothers, fathers, siblings, and cousins rushed to the scene, desperation written on their faces. One woman collapsed to her knees at the sight of the yellow tape, screaming a name over and over. Officers gently held her back, explaining that she couldn't go inside. She begged them, sobbing, her voice cracking under the weight of reality. "Please, just let me see them, please." A man, believed to be a cousin of one of the victims, pressed his fists against his forehead, pacing back and forth, muttering prayers under his breath. Others clung to each other, forming a small circle of grief just beyond the reach of the flashing lights. The street, once filled with the ordinary sounds of crickets and passing cars, now echoed with the raw, unfiltered sound of heartbreak. Even before dawn, the first candles appeared at the edge of the crime scene tape. Someone left a bouquet of white roses. Another placed a handwritten note, folded carefully and tucked under a stone so the wind wouldn't carry it away. As the hours passed, more offerings appeared: teddy bears, framed photographs, crosses made of wood. By morning, the makeshift memorial had grown into a vibrant patch of color and light in the midst of darkness. Friends and family gathered, lighting candles, holding hands, and whispering prayers. The names of the victims, though not yet released officially by authorities, were spoken aloud in soft voices among those who knew them. "Gone too soon," one young man said, shaking his head as he placed a candle on the ground. "They didn't deserve this. Nobody deserves this." The triple homicide didn't just take 3 lives. It sent shockwaves through the entire Mount Washington community. For many, the neighborhood was a symbol of safety, a place where children rode bikes in the cul-de-sac, and doors were often left unlocked. Now that sense of security was shattered. Parents held their children closer that night. Elderly residents double-checked their locks. Conversations at the local diner the next morning were hushed but heavy, every table filled with theories, fears, and tears. "This isn't supposed to happen here," said a longtime resident, stirring his coffee slowly. "We read about things like this in the news. Big cities. Not Mount Washington.
Shot himself
Not
in
our
an attempt
home.
to take his
Local
own life.
churches opened their
Police did
doors,
not-
offering comfort and prayer services. Counselors volunteered to speak with grieving family members. The school district issued a statement, offering additional support for students who might be impacted by the tragedy. At a press conference held the next day, police confirmed what many already feared. The deaths were indeed the result of a triple homicide. They declined to provide details about the cause of death or possible suspects, citing the ongoing investigation. The safety of our community is our top priority, the police chief said, his voice steady but somber. We are dedicating all available resources to bring justice to the victims and their families. We ask for patience as we work through the evidence and follow the leads. Reporters pressed for more details. Was it a targeted attack? Was the suspect still at large? Were residents in danger? The chief did not offer specifics, but he acknowledged the fear gripping the neighborhood. We are doing everything in our power to ensure the safety of Mount Washington, he repeated, before stepping away from the